Lunches. I was going to spend a few minutes and just talk about the contractual relationship that we have with our builders and how it is different. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think that we've been down the road a little bit with Ron, and he's been able to explain some of the things that they do. Suffice it to say that the relationship that we enjoy with 25 general contractors around the nation is that we're inherent with them, but we're not either under their authority or they're not under our authority. We don't form a contract with them in the way that a design-build relationship happens. And that is so that we can have some independence from one another while we're relying on one another. So it's a unique relationship, not found in many places, but this is a unique aspect. So instead of going through the intricacies of all that and our procurement methods, which are, they may come out in our discussion time here, our Q&A time. Rather than do that, I thought maybe it would be better for us and for Matt to simply let you ask some questions. And if you don't have some questions, there is some information I can share. But while you're sharing your meal, if you want to pop some questions out there, we'd like to help answer them. If you have specific questions about either things you're dealing with right now, property decisions or building decisions, or if you want to generalize that in some way, that's fine too. However you want to do that, I'd be glad to offer whatever insights, or I'll even return a question with a question. So, does anybody have anything that they want to bring forward? Yes, ma'am.
So we've already started working with a local architect.
Mm-hmm.
Can these builders work with our local architect, or are they just with you?
Yes, they can. The builder can work with your local architect. They won't know how to do the way that we do things. There's certain systems, and there's our procurement process is very unique. The way that we go to market is very unique. The way that we engage with subcontractors ahead of the bid phase. There is a legitimate bid phase. And architects are not aware of that. They just won't be employed. They just don't know about it. So you'll miss out on some of that stuff. But yes, of course, if you've started a project and you've already got your plans developed a certain distance, it doesn't necessarily make sense to start from scratch again. Yeah. I should probably mention I'm very comfortable with long periods of silence. So.
If someone does have a question, I'm going to come with the mic because we're video recording session. We want to make sure the questions are heard on that video recording. So give me a second to get to your hand with the mic.
How many of you all have been through a building project at your local area? Have you done that? Are you guys architects, or are you buildings? No? Did you survive it? Hallelujah. Yeah.
Typically you pay our architect between 7 and 10% to design your building. What are the pre-construction costs that Building God's Ways has for that particular aspect of it? And I know the charrette is a good part of that.
Yeah, so the architectural fees range anywhere from, you said 7 to 10%. In California they can be higher, in other parts of the nation they can be lower. The way, I had mentioned this earlier on, we are not real fans of you all forming contracts based on a percentage basis, meaning that that architect is making 7% or 8% or 10% of the cost of construction. Because when you do that, the architect in their mind thinks, spend money, right? And so it's a problem. So right off the bat, one of the distinguishing aspects of this is that we're going to have a fixed fee contract. And the general contractor also works on that basis, where they fix their fees, so that everybody has the freedom, and you have the understanding that they're working in your best interest to lower the cost of construction or lower the cost of whatever it is that they're faced with, ABL. Our fees are based on a matrix based on square footage. When you look at our matrix and start calculating it that way, our fees are based on square footage costs of far less than what you'll actually pay for your building. When you do all the calculations and you're doing an apples-to-apples comparison, our fees are typically 0.5 to 1 percentage point under 7%. And that includes travel expenses, includes everything else. If we can bring further savings to that, we will do that. Remodeling is a little, we have to just go in and see the extent of the remodel before we fix the fees, but we do fix the fees, so understand that. In California, it is very normal for us to offer fees for a project and find out that we're half the cost of the local architects. And the owners are actually questioning us, why aren't you charging enough? What are you not giving to us that we're getting from them? I can tell you that our drawings are at least, if not far more complete than what you typically get out of in a situation like that. We just work with these building systems all the time, and our drawings are just replete with information. And so our specs, however, are minimal specs. We know that a factor of cost is added when you plop on a table a specification manual that's that thick, and you say, okay, I need your bid, and they've got a set of drawings that's this big around, and a spec manual that's big, your cost is going to get jacked through the roof. We write what's called a short language version spec. It gets to the heart of the matter, but it doesn't overwhelm them with complexity to scare them into their big number. So we're very cautious about that. The procurement stage, by the way, is very interesting. We want to integrate with subcontractors during this phase ahead of the bid, and we will say stuff to them like, we want you all to make some money on this project. Tell us what makes you money on the project. What we're asking them to do is we're asking them to think about means and methods and sequencing to the extent that they're able to offer to us information under which the conditions are primed for them to be able to offer the lowest possible price. And we'll hear stuff all the time that's common. We'll hear stuff from HVAC contractors who will say, don't put the steel studs in the building before I get there. If you put the steel studs in the building and I have to amend the steel framing in order to get the ductwork on, my labor costs go up because I'm first of all working in mazes of steel studs, and then I'm having to go in and correct all the work to the steel stud walls that are already built. So sequence it so that I can get my ductwork in ahead of the steel stud guys. It's easier for them to work around me. We get that. We've had ductwork guys say, don't make me work off of dirt. Put the concrete slabs in the building and then call me in. First of all, when you tell them, we want you to make money on the project, they don't believe you when you say that. They think, okay, here's the squirrely architect saying that we want you to make money. What he's really saying is, we want to get as much money from you as possible. Well, we do want them to be efficient, of course. We want them to be assured that when it comes bid time for them to offer their price, that they're assured that the concrete slabs are going to be put in place, that the steel studs are not going to be lifted up, that everything is set for them so that when they offer their bid price, they know what the circumstances are, and we will write that into their contracts so that they know. Because their bid is not based on some fictitious number in the budget. Their bid is based on who else is bidding the project, who are they competing against, right? Or how busy they are. So this is good information exchange that happens in pre-bid meetings that happens with these folks. This is really crucial information, and it's crucial for you that if you're going to be asked to minister to them, and you are not establishing a respectful relationship that is a quid pro quo relationship, where they feel honored and paid on time, by the way, then they will not respond well to a ministry outreach if they think you're there to use and abuse them. So this is a good basis to begin to establish a relationship with subcontractors that's respectful, and you can gain knowledge from them. When you're asking them, if this was your building, how would you have done this? And they'll tell you stuff. They'll say, by the way, this is their prime time to get back at every ridiculous comment they've heard from architects and engineers over their whole careers. And they come after us pretty hard. And they'll say, well, why did you do it this way? This is ridiculous. And they're blatant. I mean, they're blunt and honest. It's okay. It's all right. It's a good, productive meeting to be able to hear the stuff that comes back from these subs. They will tell us. And the owner's sitting in the meeting, by the way, watching us be humiliated over something stupid. Like I was telling the example yesterday in Kentucky, in Frankfurt, when we did a project in Frankfurt, and the masonry contractor said, why are you putting seismic clips in your structural notes for my brick? Why did you use seismic clips? I can use non-seismic clips here to save you some money. Okay, great, that's great. How much money do we save? There are $1.75 cost difference between each clip. Okay, great, we save $1.75. How many have you got? 30,000 of them. Wow. 30,000. The owner's looking at me like, yeah, why didn't you specify seismic clips? That's not California, this is northern Kentucky. That was a really important thing to hear, as humiliating as it was. But it happened before the bid. Who gets the benefit of that? The owner got the full benefit of that. Because that masonry contractor was asked to express his opinion and say, what's the best situation here? You know, it's amazing what people will do in those situations, what they'll do. So, anyway, any other questions that we can help?
Our church just celebrated its 200th anniversary
Wow.
2 years ago. We have our chapel, which is now a historical spot, but it's not used very often. So the questions keep coming up, what can we do with that chapel?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a historical building, so some people are really against doing anything with it, and other people are moving to, modern day. So what recommendations would you make to that?
How big is the chapel? How many does it seat?
Oh, it seems about 100. Well, they told me 100, but
And is it encased within the building, or is it set aside as a separate individual structure?
it's
It's
connected.
connected.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
got a balcony and the original bell tower. Underneath is used to be a kitchen. It's now our food pantry and the youth room.
You know, I worked on a project in Fort Douglas, which was attached to the University of Utah, and Fort Douglas was used as the home base for the 2002 Winter Olympics for the housing for the athletes. And they had a chapel that was about that size. It was, you know, in our world out in Utah, 200 years is, nobody was around 200 years ago except for the indigenous people. We took that chapel and turned it into we renovated it. We spent $750,000 on this because it was government money and they had an endless supply of money there. But we spent a lot of money and renovated it and turned it into a space that a church came in and actually used it as a launch point for a church plant. Gospel Grace Church came in and used it for 2 years to witness to students in the area. But the rest of the week it was used for a variety of other university-based community events. And, you know, depending on the location, we would have to explore more about where it is and what the surrounding community has in terms of amenities to understand. People are always looking for good gathering space. They like that. So it may be if there is a semi-detached aspect to it that it can be used for those kinds of things. Does it have restrooms inside of it?
No, it's right on the outside of it. I mean, the
Okay,
door's
so they're
here,
nearby.
bathroom's right here.
Okay, so you can get to bathrooms okay. You know, some of it is, can you segregate it from the rest of the building if people are going to be coming in from the community to use it? Are they going to be flowing through the rest of your building? You don't want to set that
Yeah,
up.
they come through the whole church and to get to it.
Yeah, I would say the answer to your question, the first stop is to have David go by and take a look at it and understand it, and then through photography and some other means, he can convey that stuff to us. Actually, we're in the area doing charrettes all the time, whether it's me or Austin or David from our office that come in to do that. We can run by and take a look at it and begin to explore ideas along those lines. So, historic properties are tough because, you know, I use the phrase all the time, they seldom have debt attached to them. You're so blessed to have this facility with no debt. You're so saddled with, what in the world do we do with this building? You know, how does this work? I mean, I've worked on a lot of projects before where there was no possibility of them taking down the building, and they had a community responsibility to keep it moving and keep it engaged and going because it was an important part of the neighborhood. But, you know, coming up with viability for it can sometimes be a challenge.
Can you clarify the charrette, like the cost of the charrette itself? Is that a
Sure.
entirely separate thing, or is it hopefully folded into the whole project?
So you sign a contract for phase one with the charrette, and then later, I'll walk you through the steps as briefly and as unboringly as I can. Phase one, charrette, schematic design, preparation of the charrette, the post-charrette follow-up. I was sitting in the back of the room while Matt was talking, following up on 2 charrettes I finished in the last 3 weeks. That cost is a fixed fee for us of $12,500, okay? And $5,000 on top of that for the builder. That's $17,500. It includes our travel fees. What you get out of that is there's the homework stage that goes on ahead of all that. There's programming, there's the floor plans, building elevations, building perspectives. The budget is a detailed budget. It's typically about, I don't know, John, 6 or 7 pages long of itemized breakdown that really gets into the nuts and bolts of the project. You know, how many square feet of sheetrock, how many, cubic yards of concrete, so on and so forth. It's a counting the cost phase. The scripture that Rod put up there, hugely important. I mean, I can't believe that Jesus actually used a building project in his illustrations, It's so great. I mean, this is scriptural stuff. That's what stewardship springs from. That $17,500 is going to give you, above and beyond that, the ability to consolidate as an organization, because these meetings are really times, it's amazing to me when I go in to do a charrette, how seldom the church has had an opportunity to come together to actually talk about these issues. They're fractious. They have older folks thinking about this and younger people thinking about that, and nobody is together on anything. They've got some ideas and some notion, even ideas on budget. There's fractious conversation going on the budget. And so you'll find what happens that one of the prime benefits of a charrette is unity. Is that coming out of a charrette, people feel like, boom, we've got a common idea that we can move towards. You get done, I don't know, how many charrettes have you been through, David, with us?
Dozen, maybe?
A dozen. You come out of it, they're high points for the congregations. They're like, yeah, this is what was missing. This is what we didn't have. They feel like they've been able to talk about the issues, get to it, and have it done by an agency from the outside. Sometimes those discussions don't happen because it's too awkward to have the family discussion with one of the family members leading the discussion. But when somebody can come from the outside who's got some experience in this area and lead that discussion and gently offer some alternatives to conflict, you'll find that the charrette process can be sometimes healing. Sometimes we're walking into a snake pit and it's been a real problem for a long time and we didn't even realize it. Or we can avoid potential problems that can cause conflict in churches. So there's some incredible benefits to the gathering together of these ideas and moving them together. But the fixed cost is $17,500. The second phase, after the charrette is done, and that happens a few weeks or months after the charrette is over with, after that phase, there's a second phase, and it's the simultaneous phase of getting zoning approval, which you'll use the results of the charrette to submit to the local authorities. So you're double dutying these drawings, and you're using them to use for your fundraising. So fundraising is parallel with zoning approval. And then once that's done, then we go into the phase 3 contract, which is the permit drawings for the project. The permit drawings is where you spend the serious money that he was talking about for architects, because it's a fixed set of drawings. You've got mechanical, electrical, structural, AVL drawings that are supplement to those architectural drawings. And so that's where the architect and the engineer spend the majority of their time. But you don't want to get into that phase and spend that money until you have counted the cost. So spend the small amount of money before you get into the big amount of money. 40% of the projects that I work on, 40% have been designed by other architects. And I get involved in it, and I look at the results of this, and it has blown up for some reason. Oftentimes it's cost, it's money related. More often than not, it's money related. Somebody didn't do a very good job of either analyzing what their resources were, or the designers got a little carried away, or the committees got a little carried away in conjunction with the designers. But 40% of the projects, I was at an event where I was leading a discussion in Raleigh a year or so ago, and this fellow said to me, we had a budget of $1.6 million, and we spent, I can't remember how much he spent, something in the neighborhood of $100 and some odd thousand on plan development. They finished the plans, they put it out to bid. The low bid came in at 6.4.
Oh my gosh.
How does that story even happen? How does that happen? Somebody slipped up there. It would be hard in that situation to point the finger at one individual. I'm sure everybody had a little consort in that. So how do we avoid those kinds of things? You know, I really honestly think that if you take a serious approach towards the counting the cost phase, you can avoid a lot of this kind of stuff. So, happens in the shred. Ron?
Yeah, I just want to speak a little bit to the shred as well. Like Dave said, we've done at least a dozen shreds over the last 5 years with BGW. First project we did with BGW was for Rosedale Bible College, which is a small Bible college just west of Columbus. And they had an architect, and they were doing design work on that, and they called him. And we took the plans and priced them. We spent 2 years going around and around with them. And it wasn't the price as much as it was the design. It didn't fit campus, no one could get on board with it. They were really just stuck and spinning. And in that 2 year, towards the end of that 2 year period, we got hooked up with BGW. And I thought, well, hey, why not give it a shot? I don't know much about this BGW stuff yet, but we got to start somewhere. So we brought them in, introduced them, we went into a charrette. That the third day of the charrette, it was amazing. The transformation in that room. The people that were part of the charrette from the college looked at us and said, you hit it. You hit it on the head. This is what we've been looking for the last 3 years. And from there, the project took off. And they went ahead, they went into their fundraising mode, which lasted another year. Then the project came back around. We got through the pre-construction phase on it, and the construction building. And it's completed, and it's a great addition to their campus. In the charrettes that we've done, I can honestly say this, I have yet to see a charrette be done and it be a negative experience. It's always a positive experience. There's always a lot of wow in the room. You've listened to us, you've hit the target. This is what we're looking for. Now that doesn't mean every project has moved forward, but it means that that process has worked well. It's really well for everyone that we've used it for so far.
Can I follow up?
And to add to that, you have to remember, you would think that just over a 3-day process, how can we possibly get to this preliminary design? But they've done over 850 designs. So it's a system that they know very, very well inside out. And they know churches. They know what it's like to be in your shoes, in your church, the challenges that you're facing. And so they just have a way of hearing what it is that you want to do and the problems that you're facing, and translate that into designs that work, that create really good flow, traffic through the building. It's a really impressive process. I always am impressed, as Ron alluded to, when we get to the end. And it's kind of like, you ever seen Fixer Upper, right? When you come to that third day, it's like, do you want to see your new house or whatever, and they pull it back, and it's like that wow thing. That third day, when you reveal these different designs and elevations and renderings and things, that's that wow factor to it, where you're just like, oh. And the reason for that, the reason for the success of that is because we paid such close attention to asking the questions and then listening. When you see that design come up on the screen, you're seeing everything that you just spoke into. It's just been translated onto that screen through the process of design. The other thing that I wanted to say is the number that Don put out, the $17,500. That isn't an additional cost. That's just a portion, the smallest portion of the whole design cost that we're breaking out. And we're doing that by design because we want to make sure that you can afford to do it before you pay for all the construction documents, right? Before you get into the big dollars and you find out that it's over budget, that's the wrong time. You want to find out up front. Just spend a little, as Don said, to find out where it is. You get our budget that comes with that preliminary budget estimate that lets you know where you're going to fall as far as costs. So that's the reason behind it. So I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, just to follow up, let's say that charrette process that you're talking about, let's say we don't know if we're going to build a new facility yet. It might be a renovation or a remodel or some sort of drastic remodel, is it the same process? You get a story call, team comes in, makes your recommendations, and it may be, hey, you need a new gym, or you need to do.
That's an interesting question. I'm working with a group in Colorado Springs right now where they didn't know what they really needed to do, so we did a 2-day master plan session with them to explore, because they were so uncertain about everything. They didn't know if they needed a new kids space, they didn't know if they needed a new worship space, they didn't know if they needed anything. They just knew that they were busting at the seams and they didn't know where to go first. And so rather than spin our wheels and try and just launch into a, we did went in and just probed with a series of questions for a few days to kind of put together a basis for whether or not it made sense to do a charrette. And then we discounted our charrette because we got a little further down the road in that exploration. We discounted the charrette cost a little bit, but we tried to do it incrementally so that the church could ask themselves the questions of, what do we really need to do here? Is there a case to be made for a building solution, or do we need to go and do other things? And I think it really starts with the story call. I think.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for strategy. Bringing your team together and really consolidating on mission, vision, values. Where have we been? Perspective that really leads us forward to where we're going together. So we can help you with that process. Those are good things to have nailed down. You don't want to be wrestling with mission and vision during the charrette process. You don't want to be wrestling with, well, we don't want to create a space for these people because they like to have crystal clarity is something that we would love to help bring in that process, which might come with an on-site strategic plan, where we can walk through a step, which will really help you flow into the charrette process where it's like, all right, we know where we're called to be. Another thing I would say, a lot of times when you're looking at new property as opposed to staying at an existing property, just going through the discipline of like a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths? SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And we can help do that over the phone just to think through, and really it's just a pros and cons list of looking at where you're at, where you're going. Is the building hurting us, helping us? We can pull a demographic report on your existing building and maybe on the other side of town and compare and contrast some of that. What are the needs and opportunities that exist there? So there's a lot of that early on work that I think all of us would recommend. Get a lot of that heavy lifting with your team out of the way. The last thing you want is a house divided heading into a charrette. And you really want to have that synergy and unity moving forward.
What's involved in that, the strategic plan overall? It's not from the story call and then go from there, is that?
That's it, yeah. So, we would love to do any type of coaching that we can do from afar. A lot of times a robust strategic plan has like a 1-year or 2-year engagement that has really clear measurables that we can help you get from point A to point B, really walk through it. We have a team of guys who do that really well. So it's really kind of a choose-your-own adventure, where a lot of times with a strategic plan, churches are like, hey, we've got a $2,500 budget, and what can we fit into that budget? Where, if a church comes to us and say, hey, we have a $15,000 budget because we've got a lot of staff and a lot of people and we want to get through this. That's going to dictate travel, time, the extent to which we can make our team available to you guys. So it all stems out of that story call, where it'll be good for us to understand where you're at. So for example, we've worked with churches. We worked with a church a while ago that had 9 different decision-making committees. And they said, can you come in and do a 1-day strategic plan? And we said, no way. Like, it's just not possible. We can't do that for you. So the story call is going to help. But then a lot of times, when we lead a lot of churches where the senior pastor is really the driver and the decision maker in the room, maybe we go to that pastor and say, hey, why don't you come fly out to Ogden, spend some days with us as a team. We can really develop a clear strategic plan behind your leadership voice. And that's a very different process. So it all starts with your story and saying what fits best for your church. What does the polity of your church look like? What are the things that are in front of you? And how do we build something around you? Instead of trying to make a corporate process work for every church in this room, when in reality it just doesn't. You wouldn't find value in all of it. So it's kind of that pick and choose.
Pastor, I haven't been in one yet where they knew all the answers going in. Right? That's part of the reason for doing this charrette, is to look at all the different options,
Yeah.
to look at what would work, and to also figure out what shouldn't work or wouldn't work in that situation. So in that whole master planning process, that's a part of the regular charrette. I've seen people get to where they want to get without too much trouble. Now there is what I call the mountain climb on the first night, and that's where we kind of have to go through that process of making those decisions, right? Getting to that point where everybody's like, okay, this is what we want to do. And then from there, it's kind of an easy glide downhill. But in addition to that, if you look on the very back page of the handout, there's a scripture verse back there, Jeremiah 33:3. And this is, it shouldn't be understated, right? Because if you get before God and you're asking for direction, and you hear from Him, then you know the direction you need to go, and you can do it with confidence. So that's always, where I say go first, man. Go and get with Him until you hear. Get something specific from Him, because that's gold.
And I'll tell you guys, from the pastoral perspective, what the charrette gives you, this isn't what these guys would say, this is what I'll tell you. You really get a lot of the sexy pictures of what your building is going to look like, right? And it's going to catch people's attention. Your church is never going to get excited about how much tonnage of air conditioning equipment you're going to put on the roof. Like, nobody's going to be like, I'm so passionate about air conditioning, I'll write the check, whatever it takes. They get passionate over pictures like the video that we just showed. And so the charrette is a really important process as you move into vision casting, especially as you move into fundraising. I would tell any church, don't go into a fundraising process without these tools in your hand and in your arsenal. We've been working with a church in Texas, and the pastor kept saying, we want our church to have a front porch feel. But that could mean different things to different people, right? Like, there are some of us who grew up in the South where the front porch is where all the dogs lived underneath, right? And so, like, to me, there's not an appeal to a front porch. That's where the old people and the dogs hang out, right? That you don't go there and hang out. His vision was very different than that. He was thinking, yeah, a barbecue and a place where people gather and hang out. So he was able to flesh out a front porch vision that a lot of times for us as pastors, Jason accuses me of this all the time, we communicate everything verbally because we're talkers and we're preachers and we're very comfortable that way. And we oftentimes can see what we communicate, but nobody else can. Right? And so it's important that we get these images behind your vision that helps propel you forward. And so once you're online on board and know you're moving forward, a charrette is always a good place to start, because a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? And so this is going to give you those pictures that people can rally around and get excited. And so if you, for example, Don talked about third space. That could be a statement just like a front porch. Right. It could mean different things to different people, you know. There are people at my church that hear third space and they go back to the time they were locked up in a penitentiary, you know, and it's got a very negative connotation to them. So we want to paint the picture. That's what a charrette does, is it moves us beyond words and really gets people an opportunity to connect with the vision you're casting emotionally. So now you can say in a picture, now I want you to picture this room full of teenagers worshiping. I want you to picture this room full of kindergartners that are hearing that. Does that make sense? So it's why charrette is so important. There's a lot of, and I can tell you guys this as a pastor who's been through this process multiple times at our campuses, there's a lot of other architects that you are well into $100,000 into a project, and you still don't have a lot of these renderings and pictures that you can use as a pastor. And it's really hard to get people excited about it. So what I love about the BGW Phase 1 process is that it is separated from the working drawings. It's separated from the big money that comes later, because it puts the tools in your hand. And these are the three things that are really important. Is it feasible? I can't tell you guys how often pastors will bring us to a plot of land that's 1.5 acres in between 3 houses and say, God's called us to build a 20,000 square foot worship. And it's like, gosh, it's just not going to happen here, right? Jason and I were at a project a couple months ago in Washington, D.C., where that was it. Like, the vision just didn't match the land. And we're like, Pastor, before you spend any money, this is not feasible, it doesn't work. So the site plan and the master plan is going to kind of let you know what size building can we put on your property, does it make sense, how much dirt work, which is something we don't know about a lot as pastors. We shovel a lot of dirt spiritually, but don't know a lot about, like, what's the compaction rate of the dirt on your property, how much, sometimes there's property that we look at that you're $1 million away from even getting started because of the slope or the gradient or the drainage. And again, all that stuff that we don't know a whole lot about. So it's going to answer feasibility for you. It's going to give you a master plan that can say, hey, let's start with a 10,000 square foot building, phase 1. But let's also take into account phase 2 when our church doubles in size and we're going to go into a different auditorium. And then in phase 3, we're going to add a gymnasium. So we can help you think about successive phases as you move forward. It's going to give you the picture, vision that you want to accomplish. And fourth, really important, it's going to establish a budget. And I share this with pastors all the time. Do not cast an $8 million vision to your church if you only have a $4 million budget, okay? It's like promising your wife a house and then having to convince her that the trailer park's not so bad. You with me? Everyone reel that back. So that's what Charette does for you moving forward. It gives you a very tangible, lights-on tool to use as a pastor.
The term third space, are you all familiar with it? I was talking about strip search space.
So, yes, yeah, we have that in our church before you can come into worship.
So third space comes out of the retail culture, and first place and second place for baby boomers, relationships were established at home and work. First place, second place, okay? Home and work. Subsequent generations, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials started introducing the idea of reconnecting in community space, open gathering space, or Starbucks, you know, the show Friends where they would meet in the Central Cafe, or the cafe, what was that called? Central Perk, yeah. Right, that kind of space. So that space is critical. I give the example all the time that in 1996 I went to Promise Keepers. Now at Promise Keepers we started meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings at 7 o'clock. I've met with the same group of men for 23 years at the same coffee shop. That's our third space. The church has figured out that we can create third space when people are incorporated into our group. Okay? That's a really important space in today's church world. If you don't have that opportunity, if people are going to worship, and then there's too many opportunities for escape and exit without forging relationship, you're missing an opportunity to connect. Third space gives you that opportunity, and you do that over being hospitable. A good cup of coffee, not Mrs. Folger's, good coffee, okay? Good stuff, because that's the expectation of our culture. So third space is a crucially important space. Obviously, what is the church built for? It's built for worship and prayer, right? And that's the core part of the church. So you've got to have that space. But ancillary to that space has got to be good third space that really works in that regard.
And it requires strategy. This is not a Kevin Costner movie. If you build it, doesn't mean that they're going to come. We have to have...
They won't come. They'll just leave real quick.
Right. But we've got to have good strategy to keep those things filled. So it's really making... Pace is a really important part of this process, which you need to make sure with strategy you're not getting ahead of the budget. And you need to make sure with budget that you're not getting ahead of the drawings. And you need to make sure with construction that you're not getting ahead. So the whole idea for you as a pastor is to have a team around you that understands the discipline. Where do we need to pull back the reins a little bit? Where do we need to whip this thing in the rear end to get it moving up? And so we're talking about a lot of processes that shouldn't be competing processes. But if you don't do it carefully, they can start to feel competing. And then you're able to do that all together. Because the last thing you want to do is go in front of your church and convince them that you need a new building. And then it's a dogfight to get there. And then you win that fight by the grace of God. But now you've got to come back and convince the church that we have to raise $2 million over the next 2 years. And you've got another fight to go, and now you have to convince your church that we're not going to build a sanctuary with wooden pews, but we're going to build a multi-use space with chairs, and everybody freaks out. You got to win that fight. So the key is, what we want to do is we want to line all of those things up strategically, and we want to have one fight, one push in front of us. Let's deal with all of that stuff together. That's what strategy does. Is it requires you to fight on one battlefront, not 20 battlefronts. And how many pastors in here have gone through a building campaign and you felt like you were fighting on 20 different fronts the entire time? And the moment you felt like you started winning here, you got an arrow that darted in your back and you had to turn. So the idea is, let's line everything up and move forward strong. So, awesome. Well, we've gone over in time. So, yeah, one more second.
One quick question. As far as renovations go, we did what for our church was a renovation, but it's very small scale. You talked about being able to get pricing and volume pricing. Our painting was done by our volunteers, congregants.
Good for you.
But we bought a lot of flooring.
Yeah.
Is that something we could have taken advantage of without
Yes.
having done a full,
Yes.
true renovation?
Yeah. Anything we are offering today, from the whole enchilada, which is everything, and you're like, we're all in and we want to use everybody and everything, to the smallest piece that says, man, we could really use X. Yes, we want to bless churches. And so moving forward, let us quote those prices for you through our supply company and see how much money you can save.
And then is there a fee for partnering with you to
No.
do that?
No. Not at all. Yeah.
Timing, it's all about timing.
It is, yeah, it is. Unfortunately, we can't refund you for the chairs that you Yeah, so again, our heart is to serve churches. That's our mission and vision, and we want to do that with you guys and with you the whole process. So, cool. I know we're over, and yeah.
This is not so much a question as a comment. Two things. I'm going to speak to the pastors, the influencers in the room. I'm a former pastor. This is my second one of these BGWs that I've been to. Had I been to one of these in 2000 when we were in the process of building the church, we would have saved a lot of money. And this is an unpaid endorsement. By the way, the book is good. I got it last time. Read the book. I would encourage you to really consider BGW. Again, this is unsolicited. But had I known then what I know now in the last two meetings, and to be able to work with Weaver, I would much rather have somebody that is centered toward ministry centers than just a building. Someone that can understand the passion that I have and that I would be wanting to have for the community. Anybody can build a building. You're a great architect. You told us you've got many awards. But you know what? That doesn't mean as much as what you said, we want to save the church money. I'd rather be a good steward of 17.5 than be a bad steward of 24 million or whatever the cost is. Pastors, take the time to meet with Dave, to meet with these guys, because that's an investment. That's not an expense. I've learned that over the years, and you guys have done a great job in the last two conferences that I've been at, one in Canton, one here. Take the time to talk to these guys about it, because we could have saved money to be able to do all of those things. So to all of you from BGW and Weaver, thank you very much, and God bless you.
Yes, okay. Let me pray with you as we go. God, thank you for tireless servants who give. Today I pray that you would fill them back up. God, that you would fill us again with your Spirit. Lord, I know there's pastors here today who feel like vision and dreaming has been sapped from their life. Restore that. And Lord, we pray that this wouldn't just be a few hours that we spend together, but the beginning of relationship, because we know that we are one church, one body, under you, in that together we're better. And so teach us to be that more and more every day. God, give us traveling mercies as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, Matt.
If you could do us a favor, make sure you fill out this the green paper that is in front of you. You can't miss it. Give us your information. Check in any way that we can follow up. That is a perfect point of connection that we'll look forward to walking with you moving forward.